Welcome back to Inside the Lines. I'm here with Jake. We're going to talk some heavy college football today. Then, of course, we have a few NFL injury updates to go over at the end of the show. So going to be college football based, but of course, we want to keep you guys updated as quickly as we can through the week. So, Jake, I know there's some major line movement we want to talk about, but actually, before we get to that, plenty of injuries to go over too, and seeing how they actually affect some of these lines and if it's worth affecting these lines. We'll start with Duke at NC State. Riley Leonard, 90% most likely not playing. And then NC State also has a new quarterback. So how do you see this affecting the game?
Yeah, so it looked like Riley Leonard was going to be out for the season the way his ankle turned at the end of that Duke game against Notre Dame the other week.
Right.
But now he was listed as day-to-day. I doubt he plays, but I've been hearing really good things about their backup, Henry Balin, who's a redshirt freshman. The line is at Duke -3.5. We have Duke -6. It would probably be Duke -10 if Riley Leonard were to play, which I doubt. I'll give it 5 to 10%, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting movement is the over/under going from 48.5 to 46.5. I just think there's two inexperienced quarterbacks playing in this game. MJ Morris, who started some games last year for NC State, he's taking over the role for Brendan Armstrong. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense that I went to 48.5 to 46.5. If you do like the under, I'd maybe see if there's a 47 out there.
Mm-hmm.
But this line movement makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So we definitely like Duke's backup is probably more legit than most people think. So it is a good time probably now to get them at 3.5. The model likes them as well. We'll move over to Arizona at Washington State. Their quarterback, QB2, has taken over and is playing really well so far against some competitive teams. So do they stick with this? Is this a good move for them? And is this line moving in the wrong way?
Yeah, I think that Noah Fafita's looked pretty good the last couple of weeks. They almost beat Washington. They almost beat USC. Mm-hmm. And they were heavy underdogs in both of those games. And the line's not moving a ton, which indicates that if Fafita were to play instead of Delora, there's not much of a difference. And I think if you take into account the backup quarterback's 71% completion percentage compared to Delora's 61%.
Right.
Yeah, there's a pretty big difference in the Sims. The Sims have it as a 1 to 2 point advantage if the backup Fafita plays for Arizona. So that's something to monitor. That if you like, I assume that Fafita is going to play and Delora is going to be out because he's still listed as questionable. I'm not sure if he's even practicing fully yet. Mm-hmm. But if you like the backup and you see him playing and the odds move the other way because the odds favor Delora, I think you get some good value here.
Yeah, maybe even a live betting situation. We got to look at John in the chat. Brings up a great point. Lots of MLB playoffs today, and the NHL season has officially started. So we do have some information for you guys in the chat if you're interested. Derek is also in the chat talking NFL. So even if you don't see it on the screen, we have answers for you everywhere. Stephen, Derek, and John all in the chat, helping you with whatever it is you need. Now we'll go to Kansas. They're playing versus Oklahoma State. Still a lot of question marks about who's starting, what the quarterback situation is here. You're saying if you do like Kansas, though, it's probably time to act on them.
Yeah, I think that Bean is going to play. It looks like Jalen Daniels has barely practiced this week, and even though he was supposed to play 2 weeks ago, but this is a game where there's not much difference between Bean and Daniels in terms of the line and in terms of their play. They whooped UCF last week, and we liked Bean last week for Kansas to beat UCF. Mm-hmm. So if you like Kansas, I would get that now before it moves anymore because it's not going to move. I think this line's assuming that Bean's playing instead of Daniels. And if Daniels does play, it'd probably go to closer to even money.
Right. So I like that.
No, it'd probably go to Kansas -4 or -5.
Right. An interesting play up in the top right corner. Ohio State's running back, definitely a very impactful player in Henderson. The line only moved from 20 to 19.5 at Purdue, but you think this probably should be a more impactful line?
So this is an interesting line. You mostly only see quarterbacks having 2 to 3 points, 4 points of value. Travion Henderson's impact has had quite a bit of value in the spread because it moved from 2019 at one point. Now it's back to 19.5. Purdue has quite a bit of injuries themselves. I know their freshman tight end was just ruled out for the season, but I think this line is just indicating that Henderson's more questionable than probable.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And then we go to TCU, more quarterback questions, kind of like Kansas over there. But we still probably lean TCU. They're laying 5 points versus BYU. What do you think about that game?
Yeah, so this is an interesting game. When we had Chandler Morris starting this game, we had TCU -9. And without Chandler Morris and Josh Hoover starting, we have TCU -4.6. So we actually have no value at all. We actually had a little value on BYU. But the line has moved from TCU -6 to TCU -5, which is indicating people are starting to realize that there's a pretty big drop off in quarterback play here.
Right. So let's move on to some other line movement we've seen throughout the past few days. Not necessarily model value. We'll get to those also, but just a line movement to keep an eye out for. So we'll start at the top with UAB at UTSA. This line has moved from over-under from 64 to 68.
I think this should have started at 68, so it makes sense that it's moved. I would be all over the over. I was all over the over in UAB versus USF last week, and that totaled like 90 points. UAB doesn't have much of a defense, and they run a very fast-paced offense.
Right.
UTSA's defense has been good at times, but then at other times they've been susceptible to allowing big plays. And Frank Harris is back and healthy for UTSA, which is why the line has probably moved from 64 to 68. So if you like it, I don't know what Steven could find, but if you get like a 67, 66 and a half, I would hop on that now because I can see that going closer to 70 because this is going to be a high scoring game. I would not bet on the under. I'm not sure if I'm going to be on the over, but I would not bet on the under in this game.
Right. So we're definitely not team under. We're team over if you can get this at a little bit of a lower line than 68. Duke at NC State, we talked about a little bit. Other than the spread, though, this over under has come down as well.
And so this is the first week. So Steven said seeing 67.5 as a low, I would probably get that as a 7.5 if you like the over because I don't see it moving down again.
Right.
But in the Duke NC State game, I think this is the first week that weather is going to be a big impact on games. I'm not sure about the weather in this game, but we were talking about the Ohio game, which we'll probably get to soon. There's quite a bit of bad weather this week, and this is two inexperienced quarterbacks. I would lean towards the under, but I'd probably stay off just because you never know with these two young quarterbacks.
Right. And I know Derek's in the chat with all the weather information, so keep an eye out for him there. Let's keep moving through these. LSU at Auburn. This line has come down all the way to 62.
Yeah. So Jaden Daniels, he left the game for the end of a drive last week, but he's definitely on more on the probable side than the questionable side. So, but it makes sense that if he's banged up and the books expect him to run a bit less because he's so valuable because he runs for 80 yards per game and he's such an incredible athlete that if they expect him to run a bit less, that the line's going to move closer towards the under. So Steven said there's even down to 59.5 in one sports book. So if you could get a 62 while it's still there, then I'd grab it. But I'm not sure if I trust Auburn's offense enough to keep up with LSU's offense. So I won't mind an underplay, but LSU's defense really scares me.
Yeah, that's a defense I'd like to stay away from. This is another good value play here. Wyoming at Air Force. This has already steamed down to the under, should be moving. And you like this play in the under as well.
I like this play in the under. We have an A pick on the under here. We like Air Force, but if this game was in Laramie, I think that the total would be probably 37-36. But since it's in Air Force and not in the windy Laramie, as if you listen to Cover 3, it's always windy in Laramie. But I still think that Steven said this line's as low as 40.5. So there's quite a bit of variance in this line. It's moved pretty quickly. If you like the under, I would grab that now.
Right. And Derek was saying in the chat, back to NC State and Duke, forecast 50% chance of rain over there. So plays a little bit to the under. Let's move one more game that we want to talk about here. Sam Houston State at New Mexico State. Sam Houston missing their 3 running backs, I believe, and New Mexico State's defense seems solid enough to keep this game under, which is why we're seeing steam there.
Yeah, so I was looking at the injury report on RotoWire, and Sam Houston State's top 3 backs are out this weekend, and they don't have a great run game to begin with. But now New Mexico State could drop pretty much everyone into coverage and force Keegan Shoemaker, who's decent. He's been playing better as of late, but he's not a star quarterback that can force him to throw. This game scares me because of the turnover probability. And as Derek just said, there's 10 to 20 mile per hour wind, which benefits running teams and certainly not great running teams in this game. So I could see if it's windy and it's rainy that this game could move closer to the under than anything. And Steven said there's a pretty wide range from 41.5 to 43.5. If you get a 43.5, I really like the under here.
Right. We love a shop around moment. Let's move over to lines that have moved in favor of our model value. So essentially they're moving opposite direction of us, which gives us a little bit of value. We'll talk about San Jose State at New Mexico. They were 9.5-point favorites. Now they're down to 8-point favorites.
We have San Jose State winning by 16 points. They blew a big lead against Boise State. They're up 27-7 in Boise, which not a lot of teams in the Mountain West are able to get a 20-point lead against Boise. They weren't able to hang on, but they still look pretty good. Their defense just couldn't hang on. I definitely like San Jose State, and since the line's moving in our direction, I would probably just get it as low as possible and wait it out.
Right. I like that there. And then another play, NIU versus Ohio, that also has been steamed down to the under, which we like, because we like the over here.
Yeah, so we had an A pick on over, which I downgraded when I saw that there's an 80% chance of rain and 20 mile per hour winds.
Yikes.
But like I said yesterday, Ohio plays towards the pace of their opponent. If they play a slow-paced team who can't really score, then they play slow and methodical. But if they play bad teams who are sloppy, sometimes they get sloppy.
Right.
Ohio doesn't have a great run game. Northern Illinois had a really good game running the ball last week. Steven said the line's as low as 43.5, and that makes sense with this weather. So, I mean, this is a game where I said yesterday I would wait and bet live. If anything, I'd probably stay with that just because of this weather.
Right. Yeah, we're talking about weather a lot here. Another game that is moving the way we like, because we like Oregon here, Washington.
Yeah,
Washington here. 6 point. We like them to win by 6 points, I believe the model has. And they've moved down to 2.5-point favorites versus Oregon. So what is it that we like about Washington here?
Yeah, this is game day. This is the big game of the week. We like Washington, and we've been saying that we like Michael Penix to win the Heisman. He's moved from plus 550 to plus 210. So we got some really good value for you if you listen to us. And since we haven't winning by 6, could be the only time left that you get Michael Penix at plus value. Because if they lose, it's going to go down. But if they win, it's probably going to go to about even odds.
Right.
So, but we like Washington. If you get it minus 2.5, I think it might be an act now. If you do like Washington, because I could see it moving to minus 2, but I don't see it. I mean, this is a big game for both Heisman contenders, like Cheesy just said. Bo Nix, baby. Bo Nix is right there for the Heisman. It's going to be interesting to see this two really good offenses, but Penix throws the ball more downfield than Nix. So it's going to be interesting to see how these Washington defenders eliminate Nix's short passes.
Right. Yeah, so that's certainly an act now that we like. So Washington minus 2.5, probably wise to get that now on top of Wyoming Air Force under. That is getting steamed down to the under. So try to get on that before it gets out of hand. That's all we're going to talk about now for college football. We want to do a quick update in the NFL. Obviously, more than two big injuries, but we'll talk about two major ones. I'm going to bring Steven in here so we can talk about, first we'll talk about some Justin Jefferson here. Ran the numbers on that. How is this affecting the Vikings?
Yeah, so the lines was the look ahead line before Sunday was Minnesota minus 4.5 and 48.5 over under. It's now at minus 2.5 with the over under as low as 44. So, because on both sides, there's not only Jefferson out in fantasy, Addison's now a top 20 wide receiver, Osborne's top 35. And then there's a sleeper, Brandon Powell. He got 4 catches for 43 yards last week when after the injury, and he's a jet sweep kind of wide receiver. He has 18 rush attempts since last season, so that's who you might look at. But in terms of the line, Chicago on the other side also has injuries at running back. So understand why the line came down. We still love the over because by and large Chicago, except for that awful first half by Washington, they've been the same 30-point allowed team that they've been for the last couple seasons. And Minnesota, they've just put pooped the bed basically in the red zone and cost them around 4 points a game this year. I also think a lot of teams, a lot of bettors really rode Minnesota overs last year. They were 12-6. And then this year, they're only 1-4. So I think there's a lot of burnt bettors who are tired of backing that over, which is bringing the line under. But I think it's time to get back on the over.
Right. Yeah. So not necessarily as large of an impact we think that some other people will see, because there are plenty of weapons still left on that offense. We'll move over to the Dolphins. Another devastating injury here to their rookie running back. This we do see, HN. We do see this impacting them probably more than most anything. Back. It's very interesting to see how much we think he's impacted the lines.
I like to throw in my old references virtually every conversation, but especially on this show. And the old reference I have is, obviously Mike McDaniel is part of the Shanahan coaching tree, which started with Mike Shanahan. And those of you who are, like me, twice or more older than Mackenzie, will remember Orlando Scary and Mike Anderson of the Broncos. So basically any running back with the Broncos 25 years ago will get 1,000 yards. And then, but they weren't, because it was a system. But then you had Terrell Davis, who is a true standout talent, and that's when they won Super Bowls, and he's a Hall of Famer. HN, obviously it's too early to say he's a Hall of Famer, but given that he's probably the fastest player in the league, he's an actual difference maker in our model, which is very rare for running backs. So the line moved to as much as 14.5 Miami. And then with him being rolled out, it's settled in at 13.5. And we had Miami at 13.5 before the injury was announced. This was one of the rare occasions where our line moved a full 2.5 points without HN available. So that's that's in terms of fantasy. Jeff Wilson may be back this week, and so besides Mostert, Wilson might be the guy that you could pick up. He had 7 double-digit fantasy games last year.
Yeah. And speaking of fantasy, Derek was saying how he's had the most fantasy points in the NFL in the past 3 weeks. So definitely a blow for some fantasy teams, including Jake, who has him, and I believe also Justin Jefferson. So, Jake, you're in our thoughts and prayers. One more thing we want to mention, one more act now pick from the NFL that we've seen the line actually move the opposite the way that we intended, which is great for value because we still are confident in our picks. So we're looking at the Colts at the Jags. Line moved from 45.5 to 46.5, I believe. And we like the under here.
Yeah, we see this a lot, like last week's Colts-Titans game, another AFC matchup. With Anthony Richardson out, when Gardner Minshew led the Colts to a win in Baltimore, there were 4 or 5 long runs by the Colts, but they were all against a weakened. This is a little man. Baltimore was without its best edge rusher, edge setter at the time, and besides that, around all but 4 carries, the Colts averaged around 1.5 yards per carry. Last week, they obviously busted a long, nearly 60-yard touchdown. So I think that with the models is saying that without Richardson there, and given that the Jags just completely shut down the Bills' running game, that there won't be as many long runs as you might expect with Jonathan Taylor back in the duo with there. So we like the under, just like we did in the Tennessee Colts game.
Right. Yeah, again, we don't see as many explosive plays here happening against this Jags defense. So definitely a good place to take the under. I'll call it an act now because you could see this line go back down. So if you can get the under at 46.5, we'll certainly call that value. Quick recap real quick of some of our act now picks. Washington minus the 2.5 versus Oregon. It's probably the best value you will get, including Wyoming at Air Force. If you can get under 42.5 still, probably time to act now on that. And then Colts at the Jags. We do like that under. Yeah. And we'd like the line
down to 45 in some spots. It's 46.5 still around there.
Hurry.
So it's coming. Get off. Stop watching.
Right. So with that, that is all we have today for injuries and line movement. Tomorrow, the boys will be back talking MLB playoffs. And if it's anything like they did last Wednesday, you will be making money. So please tune into that. Jake and John at 1 p.m. tomorrow talking MLB playoffs. And then we will see you the rest of the week at 1 p.m. So good luck with your bets, and we'll see you for MLB playoffs.